I'm Doug Shulkin from Relay Platform. It's a tech company for insurance. Really, my background is I've been with cyber insurance carriers for 15 years. All the big names. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've had some great conversations before with some of the business owners here about their industries, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. We're going to get into introductions in a second. In fact, I'm going to be asking a question as part of the introduction. But we have a great panel here. We have Greg Gurev of MySherpa and Skylar Lash of Alpha Secure. So we're going to start off with this question/introduction, which is, what keeps you guys up at night? So give us your background and then answer the question.
You want to kick us
Skylar,
off?
go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Skylar Lash. I work for Alpha Secure, which is a new age cyber security and insurance company. I have about 8 years in the industry. I started at Chubb, where I handled cyber claims for 3.5 years, and then underwrote cyber and professional lines, also at Chubb. And then after that, I spent some time at Corvus Insurance, where I was a wholesale territory manager for New England. And most recently, I just had my year mark here at Alpha Secure. And what keeps me up at night, it all boils down to one simple concept, honestly. And that's the lack of education for small businesses. Small business, if they don't know what cyber is, what their risk is, and what their exposure is, there's a likelihood that they could go bankrupt in the event of an incident. So what we're trying to do is to provide resources to small businesses so that they understand their exposure, understand their risks, so that we can avoid those scenarios.
And I'm Greg Gurev. I started MySherpa in 2002, and we provide a worry-free IT experience for our customers. And cyber has been one of these things that originally, when it came out, nobody thought much of it. It was kind of ignored. It doesn't seem that important. And now it's everything. You almost can't really be a viable competitor in the marketplace without having a good cyber hygiene and helping clients out. So, I guess my worst fear or nightmares are if you have sometimes clients that for various reasons don't get on the program and they're a little slow to adopt, and it puts them in a risky place. And sometimes it's a decision whether you want to keep a client or not based on the risk that they're putting themselves in without really knowing. So most come along, and once you explain to them pros and cons, they'll follow your lead. But that's the one thing that keeps me up at night.
Very good. So as we go throughout this, we'll be stopping to ask you, the audience for questions. So please think of some, and don't be shy. It's a nice small group where we could do that. First question is for Skylar. I've seen in my own career, and some of the insurance guys in here, I've seen in their career, the cyber insurance landscape is changing. It's the Wild West of insurance, and I feel like it's changing like faster and faster. So, what is your view of that? How has it changed in your time in the business, and where's it going?
So I'll lay a little bit of groundwork here, take you back 25 years. The first cyber insurance policy was written before the year 2000 from a large carrier. It was written primarily for IT companies to protect their network and their infrastructure. And it evolved into a two-pronged approach where they're now offering first-party and third-party liability. So your third-party liability is covering your expenses against any legal matters as it relates to a cyber incident. And then further beyond that, in the early 2000s, they introduced first-party coverage, which covers against any of your business expenses. So that includes anything between business interruption, network extortion, which you've seen in the news are all those ransomware attacks, and then your data restoration. So those are your three key business expenses that a first-party coverage would handle. Fast forward a couple more years, cybercrime is now coming into play. So that's anything fraudulent instruction related, social engineering, targeting your employees, phishing attacks, those kinds of things. But then most recently, over the last 5 years, the cyber insurance market specifically has started embedding some technology into their underwriting. So you obviously have your large carriers who pioneered the cyber insurance market and the industry. Most recently, we've had some insurtechs come into play where we take into account some public-facing scans of your network, look at any open remote desktop protocol or RDP ports, and look for any vulnerabilities that may be easily accessible to a bad actor. Step further, some insurance companies are now offering tools that they've built to businesses to help protect against those attacks. So the cyber insurance market has really, really changed rapidly over not only the last 20 years, but also the last 5 years as it pertains to how we can help businesses. And we're working in tandem with MSPs to make sure that all of our businesses understand what they're getting and how they can protect themselves.
What is the impact on the IT landscape with cyber?
Doug, it's a good question. And it's a pretty significant impact. In the old days, you didn't have to be that good. You just get out there and provide IT services. But now to do cyber well and to really be meaningful and help a client, it takes a lot more preparation and processes because it involves having all your I's dotted and T's crossed. It also involves a lot of planning with the customer so that they're in a good place for when they're looking to get insurance or renew insurance. It's not something that goes well if you're just trying to cram it all in at the last minute. And lastly, to be a good risk and to be able to afford a good policy where the rates are affordable, you actually have to have a decent security posture going into this thing. And that just takes time. It's a cultural piece. You just can't tell people, oh, now we say we're secure, so we are. Everybody in the organization has to start with a security first mindset, and that just takes time. So those things are all steady and paced, and that's where I think the bar's really been raised for IT services firms, because it takes a lot more coordination, a lot more effort and forward projection to be able to pull that off. So it does separate companies out pretty well as far as the people who are just providing IT services versus who are really ones that are good, true partners in security.
Interesting. Do we have any questions so far from anyone? Yeah, go ahead. So the question is, what are insurance carriers expecting? Like, what's the expectation from the insureds out there that are filling out these applications? You want to go ahead? You want to answer that one?
Yeah, so this somewhat ties into what I explained and how there are now levels of insurance companies. There's the large carrier, the InsurTech, and then somewhat the next level InsurTech where they're offering tools. There's been a notion over the last 5-10 years that small businesses are being left behind. So those large applications that you're mentioning are viable for a billion-dollar company, but a small business doesn't understand or know where to find that information if they don't have somebody in place to answer those questions. So one, the first thing to do would be obviously talk to your broker to understand what they need to put in place, what the insurance company is looking for, and two, help them understand where they need to go and how to get it. Like I said, there are companies that do offer those tools for you from the insurance company, because you want the risk to round out their cyber hygiene. So like you mentioned, MFA, multi-factor authentication, that's one tool that a business would need to round out their cyber hygiene. There's also an EDR tool, which is your endpoint detection and response, basically an internal threat detector, any kind of vulnerability management tool, which includes patching, and then obviously your backups. You want to make sure that you have off-site encrypted backups in addition to anything you might have stored internally. So allowing, or a broker helping an insured understand what they need to put in place is one, the first battle, and two, helping them put those tools in place.
Yeah, it's like you got to pick a quarterback.
Yeah, so a lot of things in my experience, we quote business based on the application that is signed or filled out by the CFO or the CEO with no involvement by the IT team, and then maybe down the line the IT team gets involved and they're like, what is this? This is wrong, this is incorrect. It's very important to make sure you have your IT team or your MSP involved early, or even your CISO if you're large enough to have one.
Greg, did you want to chime in?
Yeah. So Rick, what we've done actually, we've updated our plans with our customers, and we've been going through customers and converting them over to ones that are more heavily focused on this. So for example, I think one of the goals in the plan is to make sure that we get ahead of that form. And we can look at it from the form that was last year and then see the additional questions that are coming up that the insurance companies are asking for. So they kind of start, you can see where the questions are going, and they're not too aggressive, but you can see where the next year's questions are going to come from. And we can see it from different carriers. So like probably on the next renewal, this is what you're going to see. We need to make sure we're addressing those things. And then it is all the things that Skylar mentioned. So, you know, it's first of all, it's all the check boxes, right? Make sure there's no open ports. All the things that you're guaranteed to get hacked, those have to be shut down for sure. But then it's the other things, like you do need to have cybersecurity training and phishing simulation within the organization. The multi-factor authentication, you have to validate that it's actually turned on for everybody, right? Because that's usually a switch. It can be on or off. So it has to be, you have to go and do an audit, make sure that multi-factor is actually turned on. It's also really healthy to have a password manager or some type of identity management system. And I think that's going to be the next big challenge, because we're all kind of used to being able to verbally approve something or be able to do something on video. But you know, as everybody's been seeing with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, you just can't trust anything anymore. And really being able to figure out identity management and validating, you know, that these are real people and they have these accesses is going to be essential. And that's kind of the next challenge that I see companies like Cisco, who's sponsoring this event. Those are the companies that are looking at that and looking at these challenges that they were going to overcome.
I want to touch on phishing training you mentioned. All these tools that we're discussing now, they don't solve for human error. So phishing training and the education behind how to target a faulty email or something that doesn't look correct is very important for your business, because MFA, EDR, your backups, they don't solve for that issue. Educating your employees on what the risks are and what it could be with phishing training is very important to help solve against fraudulent instruction claims.
And I think the hardest piece to get through is a lot of this is coming from the supply chain, right? So there's a heightened awareness of supply chain because of the stuff of COVID and people not being able to get chips for their cars and all that. So bigger companies really have made it a bigger priority now to make sure that their supply chain's intact and that their vendors, their suppliers are strong. The reverse is also true. They're looking to make sure that you know, the vendor that it's the vendors that are supplying to these larger companies that are the real risk for these bigger companies. Because typically, like an accounting department would trust an invoice coming through electronically. That invoice could have bad code in it. So there's a real trust thing going on with bigger companies and their vendors and suppliers. So that's one of the things. A lot of these breaches come from suppliers, and that's a tough one, because it's your guards down, your defenses are down. You're like, oh, these are the people that send us invoices every month. These are people we do business with every month. But when they get hacked, that's where the thing can go bad quickly.
So let's repeat the question just so that it gets on the mic. So the question is, there's all types of industries with different considerations. Do the applications, and there's all different types of data, do the applications in the cyberspace distinguish among those industries or not?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question. It definitely depends who your carrier is. So there's always going to be a base form for whatever insurance carrier you have, and then those carriers will have endorsements modifying their existing base policy language. So in the application process, if, like, let's say you collect payment card data, the application may ask your PCI compliance level based on the number of transactions you might have. And then further that, if it's a healthcare risk, they might ask your HIPAA compliance, or if you're consulting your HIPAA compliance, those types of things. And then based on, one, the carrier you go with, and then the endorsements and coverage that they offer, they may tailor it based on the industry class. So you may see a healthcare specific endorsement put onto an insurance company's base policy language, modifying the language to cater to that business class.
All right, Greg, let's talk about cyber practices. You come in contact with your current customers, of course, but prospects. Just give your commentary on, you know, what are the cyber practices you're seeing they're doing, they're not doing. Oh, keep it open. Go ahead.
So what are the cyber practices that we see when we come into a new account? For us, typically, when we're coming into a new account, there's a change agent. Usually the business owner's not seeing the things they want done being implemented, so there's usually some gaps. But the real question is, what do we have versus what do we need, and where are the gaps? So what we like to do there is to be able to run a risk assessment, which provides a gap analysis, and it shows the customer kind of, here you are in your journey in security. Here's where you want to be because of regulations or compliance. So here's the gap. Here are the things that we have to close in on. And then we look to being able to check those things off, like, okay, so the plan that you're on is going to address these things. And then there's other pieces of this that we have to take into consideration as we move forward. A lot of companies are moving their line of business apps to the cloud, so that can be a huge lift. However, it does leave legacy requirements behind. And one of the things we find is that oftentimes customers that we're bringing in, they may be a little bit behind in keeping things up to date, and that's just because they didn't necessarily have the confidence in either their outsourced IT or their internal IT, and they weren't sure, is this a good investment to make? But when they do choose us to come on board, they're pretty much all ears and want to see the facts. And so from that perspective, then it really becomes important to come up with a roadmap and say, all right, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. Rome wasn't built in a day, but work with the customer to help prioritize what's most important, and also looking at the budget stipulations as well to kind of come up with that sweet spot. There are, some things you get limiting returns. You can just pour more and more money into it, and you're really not getting a whole lot more. So you try to find the sweet spot and the value spot, and that seems to work pretty well. And I think most companies, when they use our service, they're pretty much listening in all ears for things that we have to recommend, provided that it fills those gaps. So that's really it. And then you have a roadmap, whether it's a year or 2 years. And that's, I think, a lot of times what the insurance companies also want to see. Like, hey, we're on our journey, we're getting there. This is where we're going to be next quarter, or by the time we're ready to renew. As long as you're making continuous steady progress, I think that's what a lot of carriers are looking for. They're looking for people that are going to be good partners, because it is a risk share.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a good segue into another question that we're all getting is, what can the insurance carrier do to fill those gaps? I like your analogy, Rome is not built in a day, so how does the insurance carrier help someone navigate this?
Yeah, so the first way that a carrier will do that will be to educate the broker on what we're looking for, what we need the insured to have in place, and then just to kind of touch on what we do here at Alpha Secure, we offer those tools to small business, and that's included in the cost of the premium, and we fill those gaps for them alongside our team to show or to fill what they're missing. So that includes like EDR, backups, MFA, vulnerability management tool, and in working with the small business to help them understand what they're getting, they really buy into that process. And alongside working with a team like my Sherpa, it's a tandem approach to round out their entire hygiene and how they see cyber and how they're protected.
I'm going to stop and ask the audience for any other questions. Yeah, and let me repeat the question. So the question is, there's so many tools and there's so many concepts out there on this topic, and that's why I think we're all gathered in this room. How do you start? How do you start to assess where to go, what to do? I think both of you guys should take this question on. Go ahead.
Yeah, to figure out like the right tools, you do your homework. I think the best way for us is that I'm in a member, or have been for years and years and years, of various peer groups. And in those peer groups you go, hey, what are you guys using for this, and how is it working? And you'll hear everything from, it's a nightmare, it's all vaporware, they promise you this and you get zero support and it doesn't work, or it's usually, hey, it's an administrative nightmare. Like sometimes these tools can just be a bear and they're impossible to fine tune. On the flip side of that, you sometimes find partners, and these are the ones we gravitate towards, where they have a really good tool set that is relatively easy to administer, straightforward, and gives you good results pretty much out of the box. And then I think the biggest thing for us is, when you do run into problems, and there's always going to be issues because things are always changing, you want a vendor or a partner who's really right there, ready to jump in and help. And that's the biggest thing. So we're looking for companies that are friendly and nimble and are really committed to making sure that their tools actually deliver the value and the utility that they promised versus just selling you a license. And anybody can sell you a license, but having a tool that actually does what it says it's going to do and then a little bit beyond that, that's the key for us. And that's what we look for. And the hardest part in our industry is that there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions and roll-ups. So you may have a wonderful relationship with a vendor and a fantastic tool, and they get bought by a big company that basically wants to sell them because they were competition to their product or whatever. So it's a little bit daunting, and it's one of these things you just have to stay on top of and constantly evaluate. All right, it's been 2 years we've been using this tool. Is this working for us? So that's one of the things that we've done with our packaging is we've just titled it now. It's the 2023 Security Package and the 2023 Advanced Security Package. And that gives us flexibility to swap products that we've vet in and out of that package, so that 2024 package may look a little bit differently than 2023, but to the customer's eyes, they're getting the best security that money can buy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, but where I can add value here is talk about the claims scenario and claims experience. So in the event of a claim, we're engaging a breach coach, and we're engaging a forensics vendor, and we're engaging a PR firm, and that's where the insurance company really vets their vendors that are being involved in a claim scenario. So these vendors are panel approved by virtually every cyber carrier in the market. There may be some one-offs that are boutique specialty firms that work with various carriers here and there, but the vendors that we work with on the insurance side are all top dogs, really know what they're doing, have a lot of experience, have been doing this virtually 10, 15 years. And
Doesn't sound like that much time.
it's not that much time because it's long, but it's not long. Because in the grand scheme of things, like I said, first cyber policy was only 25 years ago. But when you compare that to other lines, that's really not a lot of time. There's a really very limited loss history for us to evaluate, like how cyber is priced, where it's going, what's next. And you're always going to be 2 or 3 steps behind bad actors and bad agents. So it's just more about keeping up with the threat vectors and adapting our tools and our coverage and our approaches to keep up with them.
So the question is, how chaotic or how burdensome is the security going to get? And are we just going to get to the age where we all just unplug our computers and turn our phones off and deliver briefcases of cash that we're handcuffed to? You have any commentary on the tech and the security? Either of you, really? Yeah, please.
There's always that balance, right? The more you lock things down, make them more secure, it impacts productivity. And it gets to there is a point where people go, well, I'm just not doing it, right? We got to make money, we got to be able to work. And I think what you'll see is that there's smarter and smarter platforms that are growing out there where companies say, they see the need and they go, well, we need to have a suite of tools, right? So if you talk about encrypted email, right, that has to do with identity management, right? Is the person receiving this email the real person? And can we validate and verify delivery of this important document that it went to that person and not somebody else? And what you're going to find is that there's better mousetraps being made that make it easier, and that they're also in a suite of products. So companies are developing suites of products for that identity management just to make it easier overall. But that is a great example. There are tools that are a little onerous and you get by with them. And it can be difficult when you're dealing with lots of different customers. They may have these different tools, but what I would suggest is you guys being a platform company, you can extend your tools to them. So instead of them initiating an encrypted email to you, which is all this craziness, you can just have your standard that you ask them for an encrypted file, and it makes it easier. They'll be accustomed to your format, and then they'll be more loyal to you. Be like, yeah, this is easy. I know how to send documents to Rick. It's easy to do. I just hit this button and he gets it right away, and I don't have to worry about it.
So this is a great question. So the question is basically, how do these two gentlemen handle the objection of this data or this overarching cyber risk is someone else's problem? So it's Google, Amazon, some vendor, Ticketmaster, whatever. It's somewhere else. You know, I don't need this. So you guys each probably have a good response to this.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say here is that you can outsource your services, but you can't outsource your risk. So I'll use the coffee shop example. Obviously, you might have a payment processor. If you're a coffee shop, I, as a customer, walk in, I swipe my card to buy a cup of coffee. So that's the reason I'm there. I'm not in your building to just swipe my card in your payment processor. I'm here to get a service. So that is your exposure. I'm in your building because of what you're providing to me. And then even further to that, if you use email, anybody who uses email and has access to anything on the internet has an exposure. Kind of relates back to everything we've been saying with phishing. That is what you can suscept yourself to with if you have an email address.
I guess what I would say is you're not outsourcing your risk. Basically, most of these cloud companies, right, they provide a platform, but your data is your data, and you need to make sure your data is backed up. Even if they say, well, we're hosting the whole thing for you, then our recommendation would be once a year in writing requests for their incident response plan, their disaster recovery plan, their backup and recovery plan, right? So this is something that these companies are used to providing. And also there may be even a way of using a third-party backup to get another copy of that data into another silo, because these companies have bad days sometimes, and when they do, it's you and like 5,000 other customers. And then how do you prioritize who gets put back up first? I mean, a few years ago there was a dental practice software company that was a hosted dental practice software, and they got ransomware, and I mean, thousands of dental practices couldn't practice dentistry because their provider, So it's important that you choose wisely, but also remember that your data is yours, and you have to protect it. And the best way you can protect it with your partners and vendors is to quiz them, make sure that you get in writing what their plans are and how the response time and the recovery time objectives, so you understand when a bad day happens to them, what does that look like to you? That's your best defense.
And the systemic risk exposure that Greg just mentioned, like let's say a cloud provider goes down or the dental provider that you mentioned, that all ties into a coverage called dependent business interruption. So that is provided to an insurer to protect themselves against any third-party computer systems or services that might be impacted. And that's a big fear in the insurance industry right now from a cyber standpoint, is what the next systemic risk event will be and how it's going to impact all the insurance companies and how many insureds, what the total liability might be, how much limits out there, and everybody's getting prepared for it because it's coming. We just don't know when.
Yeah, I hear all the time, oh, the data is with Microsoft or Amazon or pick your big cloud, and it can't go down. And I'm just standing on the Titanic. Actually, I'm staying on the shore watching them sail off on the Titanic. And I'm like, man, history does not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. So we are bracing for, we don't know what. We would be very rich and superheroes if we knew, but something like that could happen. Any other questions from the group so far? Question for both you guys. Who is buying, categorize who's buying from you guys and who isn't but should?
I could start. So there's a high adoption rate for healthcare, professional services, education. Those are big three. They understand why they need cyber, what it is. They've gone through the education process. But who needs to buy are the construction companies, the nonprofits, the coffee shops, all retail. The ones who don't think they have an exposure, who obviously do, who could be bankrupt, like I mentioned earlier, if in the event of one incident, because the ransomware attack itself isn't the expense. It's the forensics expenses, the public relations expenses, everything that boils down into figuring out how they got in, if they're still there, and how to remediate that and put new processes in place to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Let's unpack that just a little bit more. Like the coffee shop that's not buying. I mean, I could even take some guesses from the crowd here. Like, why doesn't the coffee shop buy? Is it just finance? They don't want to spend the money. I mean, actually, I'm looking at some of the insurance agents in here. You want to take a crack at that? Like, hey, you can, or anyone else? Like, why don't they? Greg, you want to take a shot at the question?
Yeah, I agree with what Kevin's saying. I mean, basically, there's that risk pool, and I think either you're in the program and you have a partner that's going to help you respond and recover to an incident, or you're going to be on the outside looking in, and that doesn't do so well when you're trying to be competitive or get the next great client. You're just going to get passed over. So I think that even if you looked at a coffee shop, I don't know if that's the world's best example, but let's say you're a coffee shop owner, and then what would it look like if in the news, like every single person that walked through that door got scanned, scammed, there was a Wi-Fi hack, and they all got breached because they were in your coffee store, and then the credit card company doesn't want to renew you because you're a bad risk. I mean, that's what coffee shops are known for. That's where you get your credentials stolen because you hop on a Wi-Fi that is a pineapple. It's not a real Wi-Fi, and now they are tracking all your passwords and all that. So I guess it may just be people need education on what could go wrong. But I don't know too many companies out there or people that don't want to have a partner in their corner to help them respond to something and then get back up and running. I mean, everybody needs a lift, especially when you're down and out. And I think that's the biggest thing with insurance we talked about, right? You bring in an insurance company plan because you need a heavy hitter. When something goes wrong, you need the real deal. You need the A-team to show up at your door and say, we got this. We're going to unravel it and get you back up and running. Because, if you're a doctor's office, at some point, patients just have to go somewhere else if you can't see them. They're like, well, we're just going to have to go somewhere. This disease isn't going to go away on its own. So that's where I see the role. So, and if you're not in the game, you're not in the game. I don't know.
Yeah. So the question is, it's funny because there's a timeline here. So the problem may have been going on for a while, but now the problem is noticed. And the business owner has a decision to make, and they have hopefully a plan to enact. So this question is specific to the insurance policy. What's the game plan? What's the order of events once a claim is realized on the business owner's end?
So I can't comment on the legal requirements in the state of Delaware because I'm not privy to that. But what I can say is at the time of a potential incident, the insured will reach out to the insurance carrier and we'll discuss whether or not they want to engage in a claim. So if a claim is engaged, we will reach out to one of our breach coaches, which is a law firm who's very experienced in handling a cyber claim. That law firm will then handle the process with the rest of the vendors in place. So those vendors will be the forensics vendor to go figure out what happened, if they're still there, and all of those expenses, and then PR firms to figure out what happened, or not figure out what happened, to remediate any public image damage, and then any credit monitoring that they might have to push out to any impacted individuals. Because let's say you're a $100 million company, you probably have millions of customers at that point. And if it's, let's say, 50 cents per person, that's a pretty hefty expense just to push out credit monitoring for a year. So can't comment on the Delaware legalities, but once the claim is engaged, our team that we engage ourselves is getting after the claim themselves.
Yeah, so a team of vendors, according to the insurance contract, are deployed. I think the most interesting one is the forensics vendors, because they come in. We view them as like the firemen or the A-team, whatever metaphor you need, and they come in to see what the problem is. But it's definitely an interesting dance. I think the other important thing to note, for just speaking for the insurance side, is a lot of lay people believe that insurance carriers are adversarial and want to protect themselves and not help the company. And look, I'm biased. I don't believe in that. But even if that's true, you got to think financially. The insurance carriers want this to go away, perhaps even faster than you do, or just as fast as the business owner. So there really is alignment there between everybody that's in that moment after that call. Everybody wants it to go away as quick as possible.
The true legality behind the claim itself is what you answer in the application. So that's why you want to make sure that you have your IT team or your CISO involved in order to ensure that there are no issues in the event of a claim. Because if you say that you have MFA, and then when the team goes in to investigate and there's a clear indication that there's not, that's where a claim becomes funky and potentially denied.
One of the things that is really important is that companies have an incident response plan. And it doesn't have to be like a 90-page document. It could just be a 2-page document that says, hey, when something happens, this is what you should do. Because when there are problems, oftentimes the quicker you can get to realizing that you're and admitting that you have a major problem going on, or maybe not, maybe just saying, hey, I think there's something wrong. You want to help create a culture in your company where it's okay to speak up. It's okay to, if you see something, say something. And for people to say, hey, this just seems odd, or it's not working like it used to, or I've noticed some things. That could be really important, and you want to encourage people to come forth and talk about those things, because that can be the tip of the spear of what's going on. And so encouraging that to happen, and then, like we said, that it's a partnership with the insurance, right? We're all managing this risk together, and we're in it together. So, hey, call your broker and say, look, we just found out about this. We're not sure if it means anything. What do you think we should do? Now, you've already started that conversation where you've documented a call to your insurance broker who's going to call the carrier. And then from there's some high-level decisions that can be made as far as where to go. But I don't think that's ever a bad thing. And nobody's going to hold it against you for having someone call out something that doesn't look right. And maybe half the time it's just something else, and it's not like the worst case. It's not what you thought, but in the smaller percentage that it is, you're out in front of it, and you've gotten maybe a little bit of a jump start, and that's key.
Yeah, it's definitely better to be safe than sorry, because if to engage a claim, if it's just a notice of circumstance, there's not really anything that happened, there's no true exposure, it's really not going to have an impact on your renewal. If there is an obvious high dollar figure payout, then that will have an impact on your renewal, but it will also benefit you in the long run, because we will have remediated those things, put lessons learned in place, put new processes in place, and afterwards you're better risk.
One thing we're kind of dancing around is the concept of a plan. So I know from my insurance career, looking at some of these cyber claims, that they had great tools in place, great systems in place. The tools themselves weren't the problem. But we could always just point to this moment where it was like, oh, they didn't have a plan, or they didn't follow their plan. So question for you, Greg. How does your company help kind of quarterback that plan, and just kind of guide the business owner through just being prepared? You want to talk about that?
So I guess the companies that have compliance requirements, that plan is part of their compliance requirements. So we're there to work with them on an incident response plan. And if it's hardcore, like if this is some kind of government contract type of deal, we'll outsource that to companies that just do DR and incident response plans, right? This is all that they do. For other companies, we can use some templated things that we have that just put some clarity around who to call, what happens. And the biggest piece as well is for companies that has systems that we're hosting, part of that response plan is what do we bring back up first? Like, what is the order of priority in bringing systems back online? And we do practice this with our customers because you can't restore everything at the same time because it just brings the whole thing to a halt. And even if you have fast systems, there's so much data out there that it still just takes time, and that's the enemy of getting back online quickly, is how quickly can you repurpose data and get it back up in an operational format. So understanding, you know, the steps and what goes first and what goes last, that's really, really important.
All right, guys, it's been really good. Thank you all for coming. We're going to stick around for questions. There's a lot of talent in the crowd as well, so please check the name tag, ask, engage each other, and perhaps even share some. If you're here because you have a cyber incident going on, this is because this happens. Oh man, every single one of these, there's always one or two, and I'm not laughing because I've seen the look in their eyes. Please reach out to the many people in this room that can help you.
And I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to come and hear us speak. I want to thank Cisco for paying for this whole thing, so thank you, Cisco. And I want to thank CBM for well representing here, and everybody, and John as well. John's our Chief Marketing Officer, and I'd like to thank John for putting all this together. So John, you got some things for everybody?
Yes, absolutely. I want to thank you, Doug, and Skylar. So the only thing we want to see skyrocketing are fun toys and rockets. No more cyber threats, no more cyber insurance going crazy. So for all the CBM or My Sherpa client, there's little rockets for you. So
I might even let my kids play with this.
yeah, absolutely.
They're going to shoot you right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.